Hello and welcome to Wineskins, a program featuring reflections on the lives of the saints and the sacred scriptures, along with a variety of topics and issues from a Catholic perspective. I'm your host, Father Jim Corda. Our show is sponsored by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts, a division of the Society of St. Paul. On our show today, I will interview John Allen from the First Friday Club. We will also hear more about the life of Saint Maria Christina of the Immaculate Conception and the readings for this fourth Sunday of Lent. That and more on Wineskins. And now I will speak with Father David Bridling, Associate Pastor of Our Lady of Peace Church in Ashtabula. With me now is Father David Bridling, who is the Associate Pastor of Our Lady of Peace Church in Ashtabula. And it's wonderful, Father Dave, to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Father.
Tell us a little bit about yourself so we can kind of get to know you before we actually talk a little bit more about missions and evangelization and what you actually do here in the diocese.
Well, I am coming from a diocese in Nigeria called Maiduguri. I've been ordained about 21 years now. I have worked in the diocese for some time, but also taught at the major seminary after I came back from Rome. This year I came to this place to spend some time in the Diocese of Youngstown.
And why basically are you here? I know that you're also involved in missions and going to other parishes around our diocese to talk about missions. Why is it important for you, but I think also as the church, for us to do that?
Well, the two dioceses, that is my home diocese and the Diocese of Youngstown, decided that it was good for me to be here to be able to make contacts with other dioceses besides the Diocese of Youngstown, so that we could expand our effort to raise some awareness about what has happened to our diocese, but also to invite people to help us where they can. So that is why I'm here then, to assist here, but also to expand some contacts between our diocese and other dioceses within the USA.
Tell us a little bit about your diocese in Nigeria. What exactly is the makeup and how does it compare or contrast with our diocese?
Yeah, well, this is interesting in the sense that our diocese is still considered a missionary diocese in the sense that we are still a young church. But also it is one of the largest dioceses in the country of Nigeria because our diocese covers 3 states. And it borders 3 countries. It borders Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. So the composition of the diocese is complex in the sense that in some parts we have Christians in the majority, in some other parts we have Muslims in the majority. And so it is different from here.
How is that relationship with other denominations with the Catholic Church? I know here in this country, we do a lot with dialogue, with ecumenical and interreligious. Is that same thing happening in your country?
It is happening, but it's not as it is here in the sense that at home, the tension is still there, suspicion is still there, especially the other Christian brethren don't always welcome the Catholic people because they think that the Catholic Church is there to take away their members. But with the cases of insurgency or some kind of trouble, the church then comes together to work out a common plan to help the affected people. So dialogue is helping. Sometimes one needs to be very careful, otherwise others use it as a political platform to make some gains from the government.
Let's talk briefly in our last few minutes of our time together about the whole effort of evangelization. You know, that really is kind of like who we are as a Catholic people.
That's right.
It's just not priests and the bishops and the nuns, but it's all of us that
right.
really are called to be evangelizers. And why is that so crucial that we do that nowadays?
Well, it is important that we do that nowadays because the church belongs to all of us, because we are all, the priests, the religious, the lay people, members of the same body of Christ. So all of us have to make efforts to bring about the message of Jesus to the world in which we live. And as a missionary diocese, talking about my area, everybody is involved. So bishop, the priest always make a plan to make sure that the lay people are involved. They are able to go out to bring in people, but also to make sure that the message of Jesus is understood, especially when you live in a situation where people suspect you sometimes.
In closing, what would you like us to know most especially about your diocese at home?
One thing that I know that is obvious that Father Ray has also noticed is the fact that there's a strong solidarity between our priests. There's a strong friendship, strong brotherhood. We see ourselves as a family, and that is very important to us, that we always work as a unit, as a family, to be able to give a strong message to the world that the church is a united family. And one time that I saw even the Muslims saying it publicly, that the church is united, and the people who go to that church, when they pray in a united way to God. So that actually sustains us in our efforts to bring about the message of Jesus, but also to unify us as a group, so that whatever happens to one of us happens to all of us.
Father David Brindling, it's such a pleasure to have you on Wineskins. We hope to have you back and share your experience. You're going to be with us for a couple of years, and perhaps you could tell us how things are going in the area of missions, but also how the work is continuing in dialogue with our diocese and your diocese, and also with Catholics throughout the world. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Corda. The Feast of Maria Christina of the Immaculate Conception. She is the foundress of the Expiatory Victims of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. To tell us more about this holy woman religious is Maria Bova. She is from Cardinal Mooney High School and a parishioner of St. Charles Church in Boardman.
Maria Christina of the Immaculate Conception was born in Naples on May 1st, 1856. And was baptized that same day in the Church of St. Liborio. She received her first Holy Communion on December 8, 1864, and on December 25, 1868, at just 12 years of age, she made a vow of perpetual virginity. Her wish was to be a victim consecrated entirely to the Lord, as well as a maternal mediator between Jesus and humanity. She felt called to the consecrated life, and expressed her desire to enter the Sisters of the Blessed Sacrament in Naples. In 1856, she received the religious habit and took the name Sister Maria Christina of the Immaculate Conception. Sister Maria Christina saw in the Eucharist Jesus the victim perennially sacrificed to his Father in the reparation and expiation. She felt her place was to be near the tabernacle to offer herself with Jesus in the host, victim of reparation and perennial expiation. Of great help and comfort to her were Saint Ledvosio and the servant of God Michelangelo Longo. On November 22, 1884, at the invitation of the Provost and Canon and Secretary of State to His Holiness Pope Pius XII, Sister Maria Christina moved to the property in Casoria with her sisters, and then to the present Mother House on Via Diana, where she built a magnificent shrine to the Blessed Sacrament in the neo-Gothic style. On August 16, 1903, the Religious Institute took the official name Sisters Expiatory Victims of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. The congregation which she founded is dedicated to the perpetual adoration of the Blessed Sacrament and promotion of divine worship, the education of poor girls and boys, catechists and teachings, nurseries and childcare, and various other works of charity. Sister Maria Christina died on the morning of January 20th, 1906, having received the sacraments. She was beatified by St. John Paul II on April 27, 2003. She was canonized on March 17, 2015 by Pope Francis. For Wineskins, I am Maria Bova.
With me now is John Allen, who is the editor of Crux, the independent news site covering everything Catholic, and also a senior news analyst for CNN. It's always a pleasure to have you back on Wineskins.
Thanks, Father. Pleasure to be here.
And we know that a few months ago you gave a talk for our First Friday Club, and the topic was Francis and what is happening in the world at this time. One of the things that always surprises me when we talk about the Church and Francis is that there are things that we see that are happening and things that are changing, But is it true that things are actually changing in the church with Francis?
Oh, I think there's no question of that. I mean, first of all, things are always changing in the church. The church is a work in progress and will be until the eschaton. But I think the pace of change certainly has accelerated under Pope Francis. I mean, we look around at what is going on right now. Certainly our pastoral approach to divorced and civilly remarried Catholics has altered significantly under Pope Francis with Amoris Laetitia and this kind of cautious opening to allow them to return to sacramental practice after a process of discernment. The American hierarchy is changing under Pope Francis. I mean, he just named 3 new American cardinals, all of whom, I think, would conventionally be seen as somewhat center-left figures in the spirit of the late Cardinal Joseph Bernardin of Chicago, which kind of has not been the governing majority of the American Bishops' Conference for a while. So the center of gravity there has shifted a little bit. Certainly the Vatican's political engagement, the Pope's role in the Colombian peace process, his role in reopening diplomatic relations between the United States and Cuba, his role in the climate change press, and the deal that resulted from the Paris summit this year. On and on and on. The Catholic Church, the Vatican in particular, looks, feels, and acts differently today because of Pope Francis.
Let's go back to that word change. Sometimes when we use that word change in the church, we oftentimes use it in a pejorative sense because we're always changing. And if you talk to seasoned Catholics, they're always saying, well, why does the church have to do this? Why can't we do this? Why is change such a dirty word sometimes?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure it is. I mean, it depends on who you talk to. But of course, people who think that change is a dirty word generally don't mean change in the abstract. They mean a specific kind of change that they don't like. But look, I mean, the Catholic story is always this combination of continuity and change. I mean, there are elements of the church, its teaching, its hierarchical nature, its apostolic nature, that are forever, that are permanent, and that are not up for debate. They're never going to be put up to a referendum and will be with us always. But within that, that leaves tremendous scope to try to adapt that teaching and those structures and those pastoral practices to concrete circumstances, to changing historical situations. And again, listen, it's not like change burst onto the scene for the first time under Pope Francis, okay? I mean, John Paul II, St. John Paul II, was a massive game changer. I mean, he utterly changed the way we think about the papacy, the way the office is exercised. Benedict XVI, in his own way, although very much a man of tradition, launched many of the reforms in the church, both on the sex abuse front and also on money management, that we're seeing Francis try to bring to fruition. So, look, if you don't like change, then this is the wrong church, okay? Catholicism is going to retain its nature throughout time, but how it applies and implements and brings that tradition to bear is always going to be in flux. That's part of what makes it such a fascinating story to cover.
Why do people, all people, not just Catholics, like Francis? What is it about him, not just personality, but about him that people resonate with nowadays?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's be clear that although Francis does have extremely high approval ratings and he is a wildly popular figure, that's not 100% universal. I mean, there is some blowback both inside and outside the church to various aspects of his agenda and so on. But, to answer your question, my colleague, Vatican correspondent Inez San Martin, has a piece in which she argues Francis's leadership style is this. Yeah, he's the supreme head of the Catholic Church, and he knows what it says in the Code of Canon Law about his powers and so on. Yes, he's a sovereign head of state. Yes, he is a media rock star and all of that. But in his heart of hearts, fundamentally, he still thinks of himself as a parish priest. He's basically the world's pastor. Yeah, he'll do things. For example, we have this very moving story about a letter that he wrote to a 9-year-old Italian girl who was dying of cancer. Personal letter in which he kind of pours his heart out to her and made her last moments on earth magical. He does that kind of thing over and over again, and I think that's what people respond to. At the end of the day, they may agree or not with specific policy choices he makes or his position on this issue or that. But beyond all of that, I think what they recognize is an authentic human being who genuinely cares about the people he comes into contact with. And in that sense, kind of represents the best of what Christianity is all about.
We've just got a few minutes left of our time together. One of the critical things that I think that's kind of addressing the American church or the church in the United States is the declining attendance at Mass, the fewer priests situation, the less and less women and men religious that we have. What is Francis and what is the Church saying and doing about that?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that I know Catholics in the United States are concerned and have good reason to do so about the priest shortage. But, if we put this in global perspective, comparatively, we are priest rich. There is one priest for every 1,300 baptized Catholics in the United States. In sub-Saharan Africa, that ratio is 1 to 5,500. In Southeast Asia, it's 1 to 8,300. In Latin America, it's 1 to about 7,200. So compared to much of the rest of the world, we are actually in pretty good shape. So that's point number one. But we are always going to need more priests. We are always going to need more religious. I don't think Francis has some magic bullet new action plan for that. But what he always says is that the church has to grow by attraction, meaning that the right way to generate more vocations, the right way to boost mass attendance, the right way to get those numbers up is by living the Christian gospel in a credible, attractive, and positive fashion. You do that, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Just in closing, talk about the church's approach to the evangelical church. They're getting lots of people. They're attracting people for whatever reason. What can we learn from them, and should we learn something from them?
I can answer that question in one word: hustle. Listen, what the evangelicals and the Pentecostals do extremely well is that they hustle. They're not depending on some kind of small class of clerical experts to do the missionary work for them. Every one of them is a missionary and an apostle, and they're self-conscious about it. Now, that doesn't mean we have to mimic everything that they do, because sometimes there is a kind of thick marketing commercial approach to this that isn't quite consistent with the Catholic ethos. But that said, this notion that every member of the church has a personal responsibility for inviting people to join us, that is something where we could steal a page from them.
Well, John Allen, as always, a pleasure to have you on Wineskins, and thank you for being here for the First Friday Club and for all that you do to highlight and to get the news out of the Catholic Church.
Thank you, Father. Wineskins is always a treat. Glad to do it anytime.
And thank you. For Wineskins, I'm Father Jim Corda. To receive more information on that and other issues, and to listen to Wineskins, visit the website of the Catholic Diocese of Youngstown at www.doi.org. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
Christopher Minutes, thoughts on making every day count. Here's Monsignor Jim Lisanti.
Hello, friends. Owen Bradford Butler had a knack for sales. His talent propelled him up the corporate ladder at Procter & Gamble till he became chairman of the board. But Mr. Butler believed that he should use his skills for more than just personal career advancement. In particular, he had an interest in early childhood development. Mr. Butler became a passionate advocate for children, often speaking out on corporate America's responsibility to support their development. Today, Bright Beginnings, the program he helped create in Colorado, brings an increasing number of newborns and their moms support each year. My friends, if your talents bring you success, it's important to give something back to the community. Whenever you help someone in need, you create a brighter future for them and for yourself. I'm Monsignor Jim Lisanti. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Our song today is by Vince Ambrosetti. It is from his CD entitled From a Quiet Place. Our scripture reflections for this fourth Sunday of Lent will be by Father Bill Lovelace. He is pastor of St. Brendan Church in Youngstown.
Do the stars in the sky fascinate you? One subject that always interests me is astronomy. And so, when I saw an article on stars that zip through our Milky Way galaxy of speeds of about 1 million miles per hour, I had to read it. From our perspective here on Earth, that is awfully fast. But I wondered how close that might be to the speed of light. So I figured it out, and by golly, fast though it was only between 1 and 0.2% of the speed of light, which means if it takes the light of the nearest star some 4 1/3 years to reach us, it would take one of these very fast stars more than 2,800 years to cover the same distance. So, from that perspective, the hypervelocity stars didn't seem to have quite so much zip. Perspective makes a big difference. Perspective is also what our scripture readings today are all about. In the reading from the first book of Samuel, we hear that the prophet Samuel was sent by God to anoint one of the sons of Jesse as king, but he did not know which one. Still, when he was introduced to Jesse's sons, he thought he knew which one God had chosen. He looked at Eliab and figured this one had to be the guy. But it wasn't. The Lord told Samuel, "Do not judge from his appearance or from his lofty stature. Not as man does God see, because man sees the appearance, but the Lord looks into the heart." It was only when Jesse's youngest son, David, was brought to Samuel that the Lord told him that he was the one to be anointed king. So, there was something beyond human perspective that was necessary. God's prophet had to discern what God wanted. In a similar way, the earliest Christians who are addressed in the letter to the Ephesians were told that their perspective needed to change completely with Jesus. What they had valued in their pagan life in the past, they came to see as darkness. The new way of life that they learned in following Christ, they saw as light. And the same change in perspective came to a man who had been born blind when he encountered Jesus. Jesus gave him sight. But it was not just that he had natural sight by miracle of Jesus. No, more importantly, he came to the insight that Jesus Christ really mattered in his life. And when asked what sort of person he thought Jesus was, he responded quite boldly, "He is a prophet." By contrast, the Pharisees who questioned the healed man had no problem with their natural sight, but they couldn't see at all. The difference was that the man born blind was open to the understanding that only Jesus had to offer. The Pharisees were not. And that is what is really sad about the story, because Jesus really offered sight both to the blind man and to the Pharisees. Both had the opportunity to see as Jesus saw. But whereas the blind man, in his openness, came to recognize Jesus as the light of God's glory, the Pharisees only closed their eyes as they closed their hearts. And they were the ones who were truly blind. We are all in a similar position. We can choose to be like the man born blind and really see with faith, or we can choose to be like the Pharisees and be really blind by unbelief. Which will it be for you? Is there some darkness or some blindness in your life? In a sense, all sin involves blindness. We may know down deep, but we simply refuse to see how our actions hurt our relationship with God and our relationship with others. So what sins are hidden in your heart, or what sins are hidden in my heart? That's not an easy question to answer because we are probably blind to our own selfishness and self-centeredness. But that is where Jesus offers us the sight of faith. Gradually, as we grow in prayer and grow in faith, more and more of our lives can be illuminated until the brightness that is Christ floods every corner of our lives with His holiness. That's what happened to the man born blind. Once he was flooded by the light of Christ, Christ invited him to grow closer as His disciples. And He offers you and me the same. For Wineskins, I'm Father Bill Lovelace.
Blindness to our grace, blindness to goodness, blindness to loved ones, blindness to mystery. These are the stubborn darknesses in which we roam. Let us open our eyes and see the wonders and beauties all around us. Wineskins is made possible by the annual Bishop's Appeal, the Catholic Communication Campaign, and St. Paul's Catholic Books and Gifts. The program is produced by CTNY, the Catholic Telecommunications Network of Youngstown. I'm your host, Father Jim Corda, wishing you a blessed Sunday and a safe week.